So there is a lot of infighting. It's absolutely right.
Well, Harley, let's talk about next steps then. What can we do in this country to get proactive? I know we've got the GOP event coming up in Tampa with Ron Paul delegates, hopefully filling the auditorium down there. But, we both know that the DNC is criminal. The GOP is criminal. In fact, the DNC just disavowed a democratically nominated candidate. I'm going to read this to you. Less than 24 hours after a man espousing conservative and libertarian views surprised the state's political scene by winning the Democratic nomination, the Tennessee Democratic Party disavowed him, saying he's part of an anti-gay hate group. The point here, Harley, is that the staggering criminality of the DNC and the RNC will not allow the voice of the people to be heard. So what is it that the people can even do at this point?
Well, of course, I'm very familiar with this Tennessee case because we have a similar thing in Texas where a woman whose campaign I managed, Keisha Rogers, won the Democratic nomination for the second time in the 22nd Congressional District of Texas, which actually is an adjoining district to Congressman Paul's district. And Keisha won on a platform as a Democrat of impeaching Obama, of saving NASA, and of Glass-Steagall and getting rid of the Fed. So the Democratic Party doesn't even stick to its own rules because the rules of the party are that the people are sovereign. Now, both parties at the top are controlled. We know that. Every one of your listeners knows that. The question is, what do you do about that? Well, most of the population is in some level or another of turmoil. People are still losing homes at record rates. The Obama mortgage mitigation plan isn't working at all except to help the banks. Every aspect of this administration's policy, and I must say everything that Mitt Romney is proposing, is more of the same. And so if the two parties have left behind the interests of the people, then it's up to the people to either fight to change those parties or come up with an alternative. And I think what I'm still doing is I know that within the Democratic Party there's great disaffection, including in a lot of the congressmen. That's why last Friday the Congress voted to not adjourn. In the initial vote last Friday, the House, with 87 Republicans joining all the Democrats, voted not to adjourn because they didn't want to leave Washington not only with business undone, but with no Congress there to check the possibilities that Obama will launch a war in Syria or an attack on Iran, and that Obama will continue under recess, his worst policies in terms of economics and appointments and things of that sort. And then today, the same House of Representatives voted to adjourn. So the Obama administration pulled the Democrats together, the leadership of the House and Senate together, and gave them their marching orders. Now, we have to make congressmen more frightened of their constituents than they are of getting cut off from money from Wall Street. And that's the task. What I would say to Ron Paul delegates at Tampa, fight to include Glass-Steagall in the platform. Fight to include the HCR 107, Walter Jones's bill, that would make it an impeachable offense if Obama launches any kind of Libyan-style war in Syria without going to the Congress. There are things that could be done that could be put in the platforms. And I think the Republican Party is probably better situated to do it now because of the Ron Paul delegates than the Democratic Party. But from the work we're doing in the Democratic Party, as in the case of Keisha Rogers winning the primary in Texas, and this vote in Tennessee is probably something similar, there's anger at the political parties. And we've got to direct it positively, not just in an anarchic blow-up, but positively towards programs that will put our country back to work. And I'll just add one thing that I think should give people hope. The landing of the Curiosity on Mars shows that if we set our sights on doing great projects, we can still do them. Obama's trying to destroy NASA, and a handful of NASA scientists on a shoestring budget did a pinpoint landing of a 1-ton rover on Mars. Now, we could do almost anything to rebuild our infrastructure, to bring water from Alaska, to end the drought that's destroying our food crops in the Midwest. There are a lot of things we could do, but it starts with people. It starts with individual American citizens functioning as American citizens and not capitulating either to their own pessimism or to the control by the banksters of the two parties.
I really want to comment on that, Harley. I posted a piece last night about the Mars rover landing, and it was titled "The Heights to Which Humanity Can Soar." I mean, there is a school of thought, Harley, and we don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but Cliff High, George Ure, some of the others behind the WebBots Project believe that the cabal may well have a secret program in which this exclusive group of criminals has black projects and has the capability to go into space and reach the stars. Ben Rich, the former head of Lockheed Skunk Works, said as much a few years before he died. He said, anything you can imagine we can do. We have the technology to reach the stars. Humanity, if we can throw these bankers off, can reach the stars. We can become a type 1 civilization. We can evolve as we were meant to evolve. I'm preaching here. If you want to jump in on that, feel free. But
no, I like to hear your preaching, because you're preaching to the chorus with the LaRouche organization. You know, we get ridiculed when we say that the Mars program is the kind of government program that actually is good because it generates new technologies, innovation, and it's done, even though it's a government program, it's done through private contractors. And the potential that we have to deal with the problems we are facing is there. The problem is that the people who control governments want those problems. They want to depopulate the earth. They want to demoralize the populations and turn people into video game crazed killers, you know, as we've seen with the recent events in Colorado. So, you know, we really have to do our job to get people back to the creative potential that exists in man. And that's a principle of freedom, but it's also where government is on the side of freedom. When our founding fathers set up our nation, they gave the individual rights and protected individual rights within the framework of protecting against what is it that's the biggest threat to individual rights? The power of private corporate greed, private control over the financial system. And with the Federal Reserve Act, we gave it right back to those people, the people that we fought a revolution against, and we're still fighting them. But they're very weak. They may be shrewd and clever, but they're absolutely stupid when it comes to understanding that higher yearning in human beings for that which makes us better. And so the opportunity that we have now is their system's crashing. Their paradigm has been proven to be a failure. And the only question is, do we have the guts to put aside some of the petty differences and pull together a movement of patriots who say, we're not going to allow our nation to be taken over by a handful of bankers for their own interests. We're a nation that has proven its mettle in the course of history, and we're going to have to do it again.
Well, we have to have the guts. Either we have the guts now, or we're going to burn in the camps, as Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, and we're going to burn in the camps wishing we had taken action when we had time. So that's what we're trying to do here, Harley. And I want to tell everybody the reason I woke up to what you guys at LaRouche are doing is because Mr. LaRouche was talking about Dodd-Frank and it being an absolute dead end and a joke, and that Glass-Steagall was the only way to go to rein this thing in. And he was right. I didn't know that about Dodd-Frank. I did my research. He's absolutely right. And the other thing he's been saying is that we must impeach Barack Obama immediately. Where do we stand on that, Harley?
Well, I think at this point the idea of impeachment is not going to be done quickly enough. And I think what we have to do is we still have a few weeks before the Democratic convention. Despite the lying of the administration about the success of his economic policies, the reality is that unemployment is closer to 20% in the United States, that small businesses are disappearing, that states are broke, cities are broke, and a lot of people in Washington, and I know this from our meetings, the LaRouche PAC youth who were in Washington these last 2 weeks, know that many of the congressmen are despairing. But what they're saying is, well, Obama is better than Romney. And the Republicans are saying, well, we don't like Romney, but he's better than Obama. Well, why do we have to be limited to those two choices? We need an explosion between now and the Republican convention and an explosion between now and the Democratic convention so that Obama is rejected and thrown out. I don't know if there's no scenario I can paint to you that will say it'll definitely happen, but I can tell you that if you look at the negative ratings for both of the two front runners, you'll see that more people don't want them to be president than want them to be president. And they're just tearing each other down in side issues. So I think we just have to have a continued drive over the next 3 weeks. That's why I'm back in the country, and that's what our organization is committed to do everything we can to deny Obama the Democratic nomination. September 6th, if he's the nominee, we'll come up with another strategy.
Okay, Harley. Well, we sure do appreciate your time. Is there anything else you want to leave folks with before we part ways?
Well, just the one thing that, again, the reality of the situation in Europe is that the euro is tanking. The nations are going bankrupt. It's 25% official unemployment in Spain and Greece. Italy's going to need 1.9 trillion euros. They're going to need 9 trillion euros in the next 6 months to bail out the banks. And the sovereign debt is only 3 trillion. So when you hear these stories that it's the spending of the Greek government and the spending of the Spanish government that's the problem, it's actually much more serious. The question is the bank debt. And the banks are robbing the states to make sure they get the debts paid or at least covered partially. And so this crisis, I don't know if you saw this, but Tim Geithner went over to Germany to strong-arm the Germans to say to them, you have to go to an inflationary policy. And in Germany, they know the effects of hyperinflation. But you have to go to a hyperinflationary policy to bail out the rest of Europe. And so the U.S.-British policy is creating incredible tensions on the continent of Europe. This is going to hit at some point before the end of this year. And, it'd be better if it all blew out next week so that it would be a factor in the Democratic and Republican conventions. But I just think people should realize that this system cannot survive much longer.
No, that's right, Harley. And just a final word so people understand how close we are to the precipice of another World War II, because these money junkies, as our friend Mike Rivero likes to call them, always turn to war when they have a financial calamity at hand. And we saw it in World War I, we saw it in World War II, and now we see it with the war drums about us attacking Iran or letting Israel attack Iran. If that happens, people have to realize that Russia and China have vowed to defend Iran, and Russia is openly talking about putting nuclear weapons in Cuba. Harley, level set for people and let people know how serious this is. We can't allow this country to go to another war.
Well, the President Obama's policies are such that the Russians have said clearly that they are not going to tolerate the total destabilization of the Middle East, which is what we're headed towards. Now, what's interesting is the American military under General Dempsey recently had the top Russian defense commander in Washington for talks. The Israeli military, the Israeli intelligence is speaking out against an attack on Iran. So military people who have thought through, they've had to game through the horrors of war, are sending out warnings. Don't let this happen. And yet Netanyahu is a crazy flunky for these Wall Street, London interests, as is Obama. And I hate to say it, but Romney, when he was in Israel, said the same thing. So we are extremely close to that kind of thermonuclear war, like a Cuban Missile-style crisis. And it's not going to end until Obama's out of office.
Yeah, it was just shameful to see Mitt Romney over in Israel recently pandering and pandering and pandering. I put a piece up on SGT Report saying, to which country, does he owe his loyalties first? It makes you wonder.
Well, and some people say he's doing it to get Jewish votes. I don't think that's really the issue. I think the issue is that you have a section of the elite of this country that have made a commitment to the kind of destabilizations that Netanyahu is committed to. They have a shared worldview, and that's a worldview of chaos. And again, après nous le déluge. And the last thing we need is to have the Republicans pushing Obama to become more aggressive in his support of Israel.
Well, I just want to thank you, Harley, because, we talk a lot about the problems. We all do, Zero Hedge, SGT Report, InfoWars, others. And here, here's an opportunity for us to talk about solutions and to give a tip of the hat to you guys at LaRouche PAC and the LaRouche organization for actively pushing for real-world solutions, getting your teams out in Washington, D.C., handing out flyers about Glass-Steagall, talking to congressmen, and actively trying to implement real positive change for humanity and for Americans. And for that, I'm just grateful to you, Harley, and to your team over there at LaRouche.
And we're going to keep at it. We don't believe that you ever lose until you quit.
Well, please stay in touch with us. If you have any breaking news, anything you want to share, give me a call anytime and we'll get you back on.
I will, Sean.
Okay.
Good talking to you again.
Good talking with you, Harley. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that does it, guys. Thanks so much for watching, sharing, liking, and spreading this information with friends and family. Together, we can take liberty back. And check out my new website, thelibertymill.com. Real news, 24/7. Thanks for watching. Good night.